Behind with 20 minutes or so, and I'm going to try my level best that by 10 to 6 as per the program we should be done. So please don't mind my speed, because it will be at the interest of ensuring that the program runs smoothly, but above that people are able to go home in time. Greetings to Nkondo family, Unisa Council member represented by Nema Mpane, the VC of Unisa, Prof Puleng LenkaBula, members of MENCOM and extended MENCOM, Unisans, dignitaries present here and guests. Prof Nkondo passed away on the 18th of August. This is the day I was born in. Above this, I had the privilege to serve with Prof Nkondo in the Unisa Council. If university was a person, Prof Nkondo would have been a university. He was an SRC president, a lecturer, by implication a worker, a manager of the university, a senator, and a council member of Unisa. Prof Nkondo was a member of Men's Guild, and the reason could be similar to that of what Miranda Lambert says, and I quote, "My mom always says I cut my teeth on the church pew," unquote. As I call over Rev. Dr. N.J. Tsawane to open with a prayer.
Sorry, should I read or?
Start with the prayer. Someone will be towards the end.
Okay, thank you. Let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, we want to thank you for this day, for this great man. And as we begin this memorial service, we want to evoke your presence so that whatever is said and done, it will only be your name that will always be glorified. And so we say in doxology, glory be to the Father, to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be. Be with us. Comfort the family and the friends, now and forevermore. Amen.
Thank you very much, Rev. Tsawane, as we acknowledge that Prof Nkondo was a member of the Men's Guild, or what Prof Diniko Maluleke calls Madodana. As we move to the next point of the agenda, Madam Principal and VC of University of South Africa, Prof Puleng LenkaBula, J. Robert Oppenheimer argues that no man should escape our universities without.
Thank you very much, Professor Reverend Senokwane, the Acting Executive Director for Institutional Advancement at the University of South Africa. Let me take this opportunity to recognize our own Professor Olga Nkondo, who has played a very pivotal role, who is the chief mourner, the family, and all the members of the Muxe Nkondo family, relatives in attendance here tonight. Let me recognize the Council of the University of South Africa, represented by Mrs. Charlotte Mampane, and therefore to recognize the leaders of our country, the Republic of South Africa, who have also recognized the imperative to come and grieve with the family of Nkondo and all those who loved Professor Nkondo. Minister Ronald Lamola, Minister Kumbuzo Chaveni, Minister Thembi Simelani, former Minister Lindiwe Sisulu, Deputy Minister Thandi Muraka, all ministers that are here who had confirmed or not confirmed, we recognize your presence amongst us. Let me also acknowledge the members of the diplomatic corps representing various countries in South Africa. We recognize the former Vice-Chancellor of the University of South Africa, Professor Mandla Nkosi Makhanya, who's also here. Our esteemed invited guests and all distinguished members of the audience, Reverend Chawana, Dr. Chawana, and other members of the ecumenical communities present, members of the university communities present here today, representatives from the various media houses present, all friends, former colleagues, relatives of the Nkondo family watching these proceedings, an anti-apartheid, anti-colonial advocate, Professor Nkondo. I'm deeply humbled to stand before you, sharing the collective grief that fills this room, that fills the hallways of the University of South Africa for this leader who was in our governance structures for over 8 years, has passed on. I'm humbled and honored to be among the fellow mourners and South Africans who are here to remember, to reflect, to celebrate the lives of our dear departed leader, Professor Nkondo, an outstanding strategist and public intellectual. On behalf of the entire University of South Africa epistemic communities, I wish to convey our deepest condolences to the Nkondo family, their loved ones, their comrades, and indeed to the rest of South Africa and all those allies who witnessed Professor Nkondo's participation in the liberation of this country and in the consolidation of the democratic dividend. Professor Nkondo belongs to a generation of youth and activists that fought for freedom. When we think about him and the works that he bequeathed us, we remember how Professor Nkondo demonstrated in his work the commitment to change the world through education, science, and public participation, giving testament to the idea that what counts in life is not a mere fact that we lived, but it is what difference we would have made in the lives of others, our country, our continent, and in exporting the best of Africa's intellectual and civilizational and philosophical contributions. When he delivered the 2017 Founders Lecture, one of the prestigious annual lectures here at the University of South Africa, Professor Nkondo wondered whether our sense of leadership is equal to the weight of the responsibilities laying before us. He suggested that leaders and their constituents do not act in a vacuum. Their behavior varies with and corresponds to, or sometimes the differences in the ideological environments, political institutions, political cultures, leadership styles, social norms, and belief systems influence how they make sense and meaning about the world. Of particular interest also would be whether South Africans in general are equipped to handle their democratic responsibility. And the same question he equally posited to African countries and African leaders. These are the many questions and intellectual pursuits that painted his life and unnecessary inquiries about how we are handling democratic responsibilities as South Africans, but also as the continent. I believe we can live up to the expectation that that Professor Nkondo defined as the ability to handle the democratic responsibilities. 30 years later, our national public life and its discourses is full of promise in as much as it is pregnant with multi-layered contradictions. I'd like to suggest that it is these contradictions that tend to sharpen our resolve and critical lenses to keep on being self-critical and self-renewing as a university, as a country, but also as society. Professor Nkondo reflected on the questions of leadership, freedom, democracy through the historical, theoretical lens of decolonial thought. He often argued that there cannot be radical transformation, no decolonization, when the relations between people and groups are market-driven desires which are exclusionary and which posit competition as the value. He thought the same about epistemology, land, curriculum, Pan-African unity, and many other themes and subjects that served as building blocks in his lifelong career as a public intellectual. The passing of Professor Nkondo is a somber reminder of our mortal being, that our path leads to the same destiny of mortality. It is a somber reminder of our mortal being, that our paths lead the same destiny of mortality. His passing, though, presents us with an opportunity to relook and remember his lifelong commitment to knowledge and ideas. Whether you agreed with Professor Nkondo or you held different opinions, he was always willing to engage. This is an asset that we require even as we reimagine South Africa in the next 30 years. Indeed, it is a profound moment of national reflection about the past, the present, the future, as the late poet laureate, Professor Kiurapetse Khutsitsile, once remarked in his famous poem. Professor Kiurapetse says, "Time will always be, in spite of minutes that we know no life. Lives change in life, at times even rot. Our lives can be trampled underfoot as the back of a slave. There are cycles in the circle. I may even moan my deadness or mourn your death. In this sterile moment, asking, where is the life we came to live? Where is the life we came to live? Where is the life we came to live? Time will always be past, present, future, is always now. Where then is the life we came to live?" Professor Kiurapetse was inviting our cognitive and affective areas, the areas that were the concerns of Professor Nkondo, how we think, how we reflect, how we rethink our contribution to society. And as Unisa, we pay our final respects to Professor Nkondo, and we are grateful of the time he has given the university. His works and contribution will continue to build and strengthen the great university and society, and we will continue to ensuring in his aspiration to journeying to ensuring this African university shaping futures in the service of humanity, the University of the Land, the home of leaders, and the home that cradled the intellectual giants such as Professor Nkondo and the leaders of this democratic dispensation, President Mandela, Mbeki, and President Ramaphosa, becomes a site of excellence that he was in the service of co-constituting such success. Professor Nkondo, we pay our respects to you and family. We request God to give you the grace as you celebrate and mourn the passing of your loved one as the family, that you know the university communities are with you in thoughts and prayers. You're welcome, and we extend all our condolences to you loved ones who are in this room. Thank you.
Thank you very much, VC. Without wasting of time, we are going to adapt our program. Minister Lamula had asked that he be released because he has other commitment that he needs to attend to. Without wasting of time, Minister Lamula, the podium is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Program Director, for your indulgence. For the sake of clarity, I've got a flight at 7 o'clock. So that you don't say I've got other commitments. And I apologize. Unfortunately, it's beyond my control. It's in relation to the job I do. But I really want to thank the university for this indulgence, and also Prof Puleng LenkaBula, the VC of Unisa, the former VC, Makanya, and all former VCs that I might not have seen who are here. Ms. Charlotte Mampane, a member of council of the University of South Africa, my colleagues, Minister Shabing, Minister Smelane, I have not seen her, DM Moraka, former ministers who are here, Minister Sisulu, Mesha Bangu, and others that I might not have seen, and AGSA, Tsakani Maluleke, members of the Diplomatic Corps, pastors. I have seen a lot, very prominent pastors in our country. I also greet all of them. The members of the academic staff of the university and from other universities, intellectuals from around here. I know Unisa, you always host the intellectuals around. I believe this is now the home of intellectuals here. They grilled me about the GNU before it was formed. But I think now on hindsight, Prof, you might see that it was a tactical decision. The members, Nkondo, his wife, his kids, the grandchildren, who has welcomed me to their family as one of the Prof's son. Our path with the Prof crossed at the University of Venda, where he was the Vice-Chancellor. And I was a student activist in that campus, with many other faces that I see here in the campus at the University of Venda. I know that he was also at the University of the North at the time, today University of Limpopo. But I crossed the path with him at the University of Venda, and I've seen many who were student leaders with us during that period at the university. The Prof transformed the University of Venda from a Bantustan university that was aimed just to cater for the former Bantustan of Venda into a truly South African university, which catered for all South Africans. And he was welcomed as such by the members of the university community in Venda. That university, when some of us joined, it looked like a college. I thought I've arrived. Because the University of Venda for me was the first thing I knew to be a university. I am from Bushbuck region, Mpumalanga, which is a very rural area. So you will imagine, even the high schools there, it's a high school. So when I arrived at the University of Venda, I thought I have arrived. I have seen a university. Until I started traveling going to the University of Limpopo, Union, I realized that, hey man, that university is like a college. But when I went to the University of Pretoria, and I found David Maimela, I think he was the leader of SASCO there, I was shocked that this is a university. So it means where I was, it was almost like a college. But the prof had a vision. He had a program of infrastructure built. He built at the time more than 2,000 student accommodation with the Chinese loan. It was called a soft loan at the time when we were told that no, before Chinese loan became fashionable, the prof already knew about it at that time. So he built many student accommodation at the university. And the university was gradually transforming. He also exposed us to the luminaries of international literature, like Professor Al Mazrui, Professor Ezekiel Mphahlele, and many others that we could only dream of. And where he had an opportunity to bring them to the campus, he will bring them to infuse a particular sort of thinking and knowledge. He believed in building critical students. He said students should not be just conveyor belt. They must be critical thinkers. And at the time, he paid a lot of attention to the curriculum development of the university. There are two very strange courses that he introduced. One of them was called Scientific Theory of Knowledge, which he believed is going to help us to think critically. There was also another one. It was called a course for African Studies. This course, all students, whether you do science, whether you do whatever, you were all supposed to go through that. On hindsight, I think he was ahead of his time because it is the decolonialization we are today talking about. When I read some of the issues now on the university decolonization and the curriculum, it's what Prof introduced at the time in our campus, which we were taught by these various professors. One of the key contributions the Prof made in higher education with the chairpersons or what was called the Committee of Vice-Chancellors or something like that. There was a huge debate about the merger of institutions of higher learning. Univen naturally was supposed to have been merged with the University of the North. He mobilized the entirety of the university community, traditional leaders, traditional healers, everything you can find. When Professor Kada Asmal came to the university to get a submission from the community, traditional leaders and traditional healers were speaking serious English there. And Prof Kada Asmal, in a cynical way, he said, hey, I'm shocked here in Venda. Even traditional healers are very educated. Because they engaged him about why the University of Venda should not be merged and why it must continue as a standalone university and why it must not be merged with the University of Limpopo. The Prof had instilled in that community that merging the University of Venda and the University of Limpopo is consolidation of poverty, and it will never take South Africa anywhere. And we all understood the perspective because the University of Venda at the time was owing a lot of money. And also ourselves as students, we were owing a lot of money. The University of the North, it was the same. So when you merge this balance sheet, and this was now being articulated by traditional healers and traditional leaders and in that community. And he developed a very good theoretical paper on why that university should not be merged. And I think after a long engagement, even with former President Thabo Mbeki, there was indeed agreement that there is a case not to merge some of these historical universities, like the University of Venda, the University of the one in Umtata, Usu, and I think the University of Forte. I think there were 3 or 4 that were not merged for these particular purpose to continue to allow access because of the unique nature of the poverty-stricken that these universities was catering for. But that also reflected to us at the time that he was one of the most foremost theoreticians in the country. You will remember former President Mbeki, you could not convince him with common sense and gossip. So he had developed a well-developed theoretical paper. And I want to believe, Prof. Siepe, that it was because of that evidence and because of that persuasion. I don't believe that it was because maybe yourself there at Vista, you belong to the PAC. He had brought a compelling argument why the University of Venda should not be merged with the University of Limpopo. And I think the University of Limpopo was merged with the Medunsa or something. And the demerger now does prove that indeed he had a vision. He had a point, it did not work. The second huge debate, which I also believe he was ahead of his time, he named the University of Venda for Science and Technology. The Higher Education Department said, no, there's no science and technology in Venda. How can you name this university a University of Science and Technology? And he said, no, we are aspiring. The Department of Higher Education said, no, it's not possible. But if you go to Univen now, there is now indeed science and technology. So that aspiration became reality because of that vision that he had. When I was in the ANC Youth League, Prof was one of the scholars of the ANC, theoreticians who influenced us to a resolution on expropriation without compensation. He wrote a compelling paper, a compelling discussion document, why he believes this will take us forward within the policy perspective of the ANC on the ownership of property, which is a mixed forms of ownership. But he believed that if we add an instrument, we could be able to accelerate land reform. But Prof was also very brave. When we were charged in the ANC Youth League for bringing the ANC into disrepute, there were many scholars, theoreticians that we approached to help us present our case, why what we are presenting is within the policy realm of the ANC. Many of them were scared to come and help us and present and all that. Prof came. There were other very also brave leaders of the ANC who also were sympathetic to our cause. But Prof went to present a compelling argument why the ANC should not stunt the creative energy and intellectualism of young people. Instead, it should guide and help and nurture these young people. And I think if you look at where the country is now with the youth activism, you can see the fear that has affected the growth of young intellectuals in the country. So that was Prof. He made that meaningful contribution as a brave intellectual of the ANC. I believe his proudest moment for me was when he saw his country going to the ICJ, when we went to the ICJ, the International Court of Justice. He was a proud intellectual. I don't know how many times he sends me messages and also calling how proud he was about the progressive internationalism stance that South Africa took during that period. So to the family, I want to say, I tlele kurula Baba Nkondo, uitangile nzimaye, na ina, hitaitanga la yangatakota ku. But at the end, I am also at great loss because at the time of his death, the Prof had just finished an outline of my book that he was writing. I hope that Prof Puleng will help me with other professors that can take this legacy forward. With these words, I want to conclude by stating that may his soul rest in peace, and may God give strength to the family for this untimely loss. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister Lamula, for an insight. I never thought that poverty can be consolidated. Thank you very much. And that, also a reminder that common sense is not always common. I'm reminded that usually in memorial services we must have a song. So I was actually holding myself not to sing because, institution of higher learning by history, they've got these ancestors that are anti-African. But let me try to sing so that we all sing, because we are here to celebrate the life of Prof Nkondo. Ukholo lwami ndonyuka nalo, ndonyuka nalo ngilubambe, sanza iyongena nalo. Ukholo lwami ndonyuka nalo. Thank you very much. As we move to the next speaker, as Joseph Stalin once said, and I quote, "A single death is a tragedy. A million deaths is a statistic." As I call over Ntate Padi Lehohla to do a tribute.
There's no one. Thank you very much. Let me rise on the greetings and the protocol that has been established by the Vice-Chancellor as well as by Minister Lamola, and therefore take it that I've absorbed the protocols and transmit them to yourselves, all protocols observed. Safe to say that the Nkondo family, living beings, mourn. In African culture and in the Bantu languages, we describe times like this and congregations as this one as holla muswang. Over millennia, human beings observed other animal species as they congregate around the waste food disemboweled from the bowels of intestines of their species. They will stop and cry in sounds that express deep pain. They know that the existence of such contents mean that their species is no more. We are gathered here as part of that animal kingdom to pay our last respects. But as we do so, we remind ourselves of the great deeds of this giant when he acted out his wise deeds that would favor humanity. Professor Nkondo leaves us with a wealth of philosophy, politics, culture, history, science, archaeology, to mention but a few of his interdisciplinary pursuits. But above all, he leaves us the memory of a fighter of note. I have arrogated to myself a tribute that will anchor itself on culture, in particular on idioms as a sum total, albeit not exhaustive, of experiences in time and space. In his latest and possibly last gift to us and to generations to come well without end are 3 volumes, the first of which is titled Agency, Freedom, and Justice, Citizens in Conversations, due to be launched in October this year. My exploration of reading of the book confirms the Bapedi saying that Hagaholo Sinamabala Maba Haifofa Insu Mabala Analdihagana. But it also affirms the Basotho idiom that says Wana Hwale Senawi Pulela Mutumute Abula Wakibatu. The book published in March this year reveals Nkondo, an unapologetic fighter who fought from the beginning to the end. In his introduction, which takes a deliberative framework, Nkondo opens with truth to power, which all of us possess, by the way. Many South Africans suffer, and I quote in his opening, many South Africans suffer from varieties of unfreedoms, injustice, and demolished agency. Demolished agency, unfreedom, and injustice have other dimensions, including food and health insecurity, subjecting them to physical and social pain. These are the words of Hagaholo Sinamabala, the Nkondo I know, as he unleashes the Dihakana into colorful action. In 3 volumes, the first with 28 chapters, the second volume in 26 chapters, and the third with 15 chapters, the Hagaholo has deliberately set the colorful Dihakana to speak truth to power and to themselves. The 69 authors are the best brains South Africa could ever imagine. I cannot mention them by one, but one of them stands out at the global stage under trying circumstances, talking truth to Israel on the unfreedom of Palestine. The Palestinian question. Tembeka Nguka Kaitobi. In this book, Kaitobi talks not to Israel on the case of Palestine, on unfreedoms, but talks to us about our unfreedoms that include land, food, and health insecurity, subjecting us to physical and social pain. The 3 volumes should surely be the rockbed of the dialogue we so desperately need to answer our unfreedoms that have wrought unto us darkness, poverty, and ill health. Professor Nkondo was a visionary. 3 months after my appointment as Statistician General in November 2000, I decided to invite fellow African heads of statistics in March in 2001. I thought of who could address these people. I've heard Professor Nkondo address somewhere, and I said, I think that's the man who should address us as statisticians. I invited Professor Nkondo to come and socialize, humanize, and introduce statistical politics, the latter implying the study of evolution of statistics and understanding political statistics. 7 years later, we started an internship program at SA. The students from Venda incidentally became the great shoots. And Professor Ntangeni was the head of our training. And I thought this Venda man is choosing these Venda students to come here. I was oblivious of the fact that I had invited Professor Nkondo, who was the Vice-Chancellor of Venda University. And he transformed that university to produce quality mathematicians and statisticians that actually became the rockbed of Statistics South Africa. In a tribute to Professor Nkondo, Professor LenkaBula writes, "The question of who frames the discourse and its conclusions is at the heart of any process of building an intellectual legacy for society. To know that you might be witnessing the passing on of a generation that has abrogated to itself the sacred responsibility of thinking about the reality of human dignity and social justice for all is to realize our democratic order's greatest pain of all." Coming to ngwana khwale sinna o ipolela motho o motle a bolelwa ke batho. Here the BPI, which Professor Nkondo was a member of and also a beneficiary of, comes to be understood. The BPI, represented in here by its Executive Director Nkosana Tobela, Prof LenkaBula, Ms. Veronica Mtlotsi, and Ms. Kuli Makubiso, invited me and asked me to come and address yourselves. The BPI, for reasons that have been outlined around Professor Nkondo, took it upon itself to bestow recognition of Professor Nkondo as a patron at the inaugural BPI Iconic Leadership Excellence Awards in the Lifetime Achievement category. He's one of those who selects now who should be awarded, and the BPI is continuing to recognize others. And for the forthcoming version, watch the space. There are many people there that you should watch. They are under the advice of, their nomination is under the advice of Professor Nkondo. The Lifetime Award recognizes individuals over the age of 70, I am not there yet, who have throughout their lives dedicated themselves, their knowledge, skills, time, talents, and efforts to a cause that advanced the betterment of their profession and humanity. The BPI has taken upon itself to undertake this noble task. And we're just about to have our next award giving ceremony, and Professor Nkondo was not there to be with us. His wisdom lives with us, his thoughts live with us. Shiniva, Chika, Misava, Hema Rwanda. My Sesotho is a little bit tricky. So let me end my speech at that point, my recognition of Professor Nkondo's contribution to the intellectual capital of South Africa and showing us the charge forward. Thank you very much.
Just to assist those who might not have understood what Ntate Lehohla was trying to do or say, I will just sum it with the words of Prof Nkondo in one of his pieces when The title was An Imaginative Understanding of the Next Person. So that's what Ndadele Ohla was trying to do now. And without wasting time, I will move to the next speaker, the member of the council. Memampane, there is this Pope called Francis. He says every man, every woman who has to take up service of government must ask themselves two questions. First, do I love my people in order to serve them better? Am I humble and do I listen to everybody, to diverse opinions in order to choose the best path? If you don't ask those questions, your governance will not be good. As you come and share with us the news about the governor, Prof Nkondo.
Keleboha Program Director. Good afternoon, everyone. Members of the university. I'm referring to staff member and everybody gathered here. I'm here to read our chairman's tribute. Our chairman is Dr. Musia. He couldn't be here today. He's traveling from the Free State. He'll only be arriving tomorrow, so please bear with me. Unlike the previous speaker, my leader, I'm not going to be skipping what my chairman said I should read out. I'm going to do that so that come the time of assessment, VC, then this can also be one of the things that are considered that I got to execute this responsibility that was delegated to me. Program Director, Prof Sinokwane, Acting Director of Department Institutional Advancement, Unisa. We have ministers here, so I should always indicate that it is Unisa, not any other department. Professor Olga Nkondo and all family members of the late Prof Muxe Nkondo in attendance here today. The chairman had written my name, Mrs. Charlotte Mampani, and other members of the University Council present here this afternoon. Prof Puleng LenkaBula, Principal and Vice-Chancellor of the University of South Africa, members of South African Cabinet, Minister Lamola has left, Minister Nshaveni Dumela Maruna, Minister Simelane, I haven't seen her, former Minister Lindiwe Sisulu Maruna, and other previous ministers who are with us here, deputy ministers, members of the diplomatic corps representing various countries in South Africa, our esteemed invited guests, and all distinguished members of the audience. Reverend Dr. Chawani, and other members of the ecumenical community present, members of the university community present here today, representatives from various media houses present, all the friends, former colleagues, and relatives of the Nkondo family watching these proceedings remotely from various places within the continent and globally. How could I forget to acknowledge the presence of a great woman who has really provided leadership in a difficult area, and with so much grace and integrity, our director, our Auditor General, Me Maluleke, Dumela Me, Avushen. The harsh, irreversible reality of the permanent departure of Tatana Prof Nkondo stares all of us in the eye. Hence our convergence in this hall this afternoon. Baka Tatana Nkondo, Hirila Nangwina. Prof Muxe Nkondo was a larger-than-life figure that towered over the impact of education in South Africa's struggle for democracy and later. Throughout our transitional era until his transitioning last Sunday at the age of 83.
He remained a warrior, especially for our society's most vulnerable others, that is the rural communities. Prof Nkondo had an avalanche of options throughout his colorful academic life. For instance, he could easily have opted to settle permanently in the United States, where he taught at various universities during the dark days of apartheid. But his love for his people and country saw him return home to be part of the building blocks of our country's democratic order. He held in high regard the notion of giving back. Quite clearly, Prof Nkondo espoused the wisdom in African epistemology that emphasized quite eruditely that one's success is never exclusively theirs alone. It is communal in nature and form. Prof Nkondo was, in my view, a true warrior for access to education, particularly at tertiary level. Apart from his extensive tenure lecturing at renowned universities in the US, here at home, he served as a curriculum development and governance guru right here at our university, the University of the Land. He served in the similar capacity at the following institutions: the University of KwaZulu-Natal, Tshwane University of Technology, Central University of Technology, as well as Walter Sisulu University. In an impassioned tribute to Prof Nkondo, President Cyril Ramaphosa had the following to say about the passing of this great son of the soil. Prof Nkondo has left us at the end of his life, distinguished by his relentless pursuit and generation of knowledge that has made his country, continent, and the world a richer, more inclusive place. About the literary and intellectual giant that Prof Nkondo was, President Ramaphosa continued to say, his ideas and their application have impacted on lives and institutions across the globe. They have also a diaspora of academics, leaders, and administrators who have benefited from Prof Nkondo's inexhaustible intellect and interest in the betterment of humanity. His legacy is monumental and will continue to ripple through our lives. The President concluded his tribute by saying, "May he rest in peace after his extraordinary, enriched, and enriching life." Ladies and gentlemen, so many impactful aspects of Prof Nkondo's eventful, colorful life are being talked about extensively across the mainstream media as well as the social media platforms. The outpouring of grief and the celebration of Prof Nkondo's contribution to development are and will be talked about for a very long time. It is no less than this son of the soil deserves. But in the plethora of accolades and tributes in honor of Prof Nkondo, I elected to focus on his unwavering love and determination towards the emancipation of the rural poor and indeed impoverished in some instances. He had made his personal mission to create an enabling environment for the poor and disenfranchised. As Vice-Chancellor and Principal of the University of Venda, Prof Nkondo was touched by ubiquitous hardships and carved empowerment policies that sought to bring about inclusion on campus. He did the same when he served as Vice-Chancellor and Principal at the erstwhile University of the North. He was well known and highly respected when he served on numerous boards and associations on the continent and globally. Among his many accolades, Prof Nkondo is credited with leading the conceptualization of the liberation heritage route. But as I said, It is his emphatic crusading for enriching and enlightening others within the framework of drawing attention to the plight of the poor and needy that I want to specifically honor. In November of 2020, while serving as council member here at Unisa, Prof Nkondo was in his element as he delivered the second Chief Albert Lithuli Research Chair lecture. This lecture was organized by Unisa and the Lithuli Museum Council and was titled Universities of Science and Technology for Rural Development as Freedom and Justice, the Politics of Evidence and Decision. In his presentation, Prof Muxe Nkondo lamented the enduring race-based inequities in the New South Africa, saying they were fueled by a lack of fundamental transformation of rural economies. He spoke passionately about the myriads of developmental challenges, from regional inequality in access to technically exploitable to rampant health imbalances. Prof Nkondo knew too well that for as long as the structural challenges persist, so will be limited life changes for the rural communities. He forcefully argued that rural development requires our intentional departure from urban-centric development modes that dominate the current trajectory towards an integrated and inclusive approach where all citizens would benefit regardless of their geographic location. Prof Nkondo could just argue. We need a just economy that integrates rural and urban communities. Rural communities have a legitimate aspiration to achieve the full meaning of freedom in the fourth industrial revolution. But if the National Development Plan is to be successful, it needs to start rethinking the role of universities of science and technology in redressing regional imbalances as part of the development of smart cities in rural areas. As you all can see, the champion of the poor and needy is no more. Allow me to conclude with the words of a friend who had worked with Prof Nkondo here at Unisa. And he said, Prof Muxe Nkondo, an intellectual giant and relentless activist for social justice, has gone to join the immortals, leaving a profound legacy behind. He positively impacted on many of us and beyond for decades. It is said that the living close eyes of the dead and the dead opens eyes of the living. His legacy and impact looms larger now and echoes in the chambers of our memories. Go well, Brother Muxe, a life worth celebrating and a legacy worthy of embrace. May you rest in eternal peace and family be comforted. Indeed, to Sis Olga and the children, we pray that the good Lord will give you the strength to pull through this difficult time, that you will derive comfort in the words of the Apostle Paul, who was plagued by a thorn in his flesh. My grace is sufficient for you. For my strength is made perfect in weakness. And that is 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Memampane, Council Member of Unisa. I want to believe that since that Prof Nkondo was member of the Men's Guild, he might have had his own favorite song, and the family can assist. And Reverend, yeah. I want to believe. Reverend, can you assist? What was the song? You can lead us with, yes, you can, yeah, the mic can be on. Thank you very much, Rev. As I call to the podium Mr. Muxe Nkondo, Prof Nkondo in his speech titled Making of a New World Order Through COVID, unquote, says, we have to move beyond disconnections and territorialization to ever new connections, unquote. Death disconnects, it operates with territories. But it's your choice as a family to move beyond. As I call over Mr. Muxe Nkondo.
Program Director, Auntie Olga, and my family, members of this university, I greet you all. One of the greatest statesmen of our time, Kenneth Kaunda, once said during the burial of Nelson Mandela, who is Nelson Mandela? Who is he? Today, we ask the same question. Who is Professor Muxe Nkondo? Who is he? Sunday in the morning. That's why I hate morning calls. I received a call from my sister informing me that my uncle Muxe Nkondo has passed on. She was fragile. She choked several times, overcome by her emotions. Eventually, she gathered herself with a stuttering voice. She said, Papa is gone. In the ways of bad, I knew that Papa, Professor Muxe Nkondo, has gone the way of flesh, gone in the vocabulary of the church, to the heaven, his eternal resting place. Death, it pangs, it opened the sluice gates of fear. Death paralyzes. Even though it is perfectly natural, men and women fear it, thinking it is a handiwork of the evil one. Yet it is a byproduct of life, without which life is incomplete. Now, who is Professor Muxe Nkondo? Who is he? Great personality has shut down. A big heart has stopped beating. A beautiful soul has left this universe. We have been hurt This is a nightmare. I can't wait to just wake up from it. Born at Pukani village, Limpopo, his parents were Ephraim Nkondo and Emma Kuba Nkondo. His siblings were Albert, Curtis, Eric, Rachel, Gladys, Ephraim, Winston, and Dinah. There were 9, but I will count 8 from the same mother. Muxe was named from his maternal mother, who was Moses. So that is why he was called Muxe. He lived in a rural area as a boy, looking after his father's goats. My uncle was a big punch. He used to fight there and beat other boys, but he was very passionate about books. My grandfather will count if he is number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. From number 6, he was not counting anymore. So you should be number 5 and to number 1. One day when he has passed the degree, my grandfather was very, very happy because my uncle was the first to have obtained his degree. So proud was my old man that he took Uncle Muxe and his friends to church to show off. So the pastor, I am not going to mention the name of the pastor. He said, even if you can pass your degree, if you don't change your life and accept Jesus as the your Lord and Savior, you are going to burn with that academic regalia of yours. Uncle Muxe was a Jew that held the family together. He was a role model, a motivator. He was everything for this noble family. He loved us. He loved all of us. He loved his family. We will miss him. Because most of the time when you arrange this Nkondo Day, he used to smile. He used to dance. He was very, very happy. Verse ya Hosea, number 6, verse 1 to 2. Linge tatana tanani ithelela eka hosi Xikwembu leswi xi handluleleke xi ta hi horisa timbanga leti xi hi boxeteleke xi ta hi bohelela etlela hi ku rhula papa wa mina. Amen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nkondo. In fact, I struggled to pronounce the name. You know, in Africa, it's always difficult to pronounce or to call your elders with their first names. So I said, this is the easiest option for me. I'll stick with the surname. Now, I was not even aware that it was Muxe. You know, and because, you know, in my studies, I was forced to study classical language, Greek and Hebrew. So there was nothing closer to Muxe in that sense. As all of us will be aware, Prof Nkondo was robust, committed, and determined to promote knowledge. He, like his generation, was still working on how to embrace the leadership of women. He had expressed in some meetings in council that this was an era of learning and development. He, however, had pledged to engage women leaders, to intellectually engage from the vantage point of feminism, humanism, and Bosadi theorization, which is one of the catalytic niche areas of Unisa. He further understood and valued continuous education. In fact, Prof Makanya will tell you that he will always come to Senate and argue that Swahili should be one of the languages that must be compulsory. As I call over the former Minister of Tourism, Mayor Lindwe Sisulu.
sikhumbuza Oliver Tambo. Ibambeni webafana, ibambeni wezinsizwa. All protocol observed. Good afternoon to all. My name is Lindiwe Sisulu, and I come here to honor a good friend of mine, an advisor to me when I was a minister, a man who helped me guide my way through when I returned from exile. Program Director, Professor Sinokwane, Acting Executive Director of the Department of Institutional Advancement of Unisa, Professor Olga Nkondo, and all members of the late Professor Muxe Nkondo in attendance here today. Mrs. Charlotte Mampane and other members of the University Council present here, Professor Puleng LenkaBula, Principal and Vice-Chancellor of the University of South Africa. I acknowledge also Minister Ntshavheni seems to be the sole representative of government with us today. We acknowledge you. And I acknowledge myself, okay? I've got... I think there's a misprint there somewhere. Members of the Diplomatic Corps representing various countries here in South Africa, members of the Institute of Higher Learning here in Unisa, Professor Olga Nkondo and family members of the late Muxe Nkondo in attendance today, Mrs. Charlotte Mampane and other members of the University Council present here today, members of Parliament that we still have here, Minister Ntshavheni, welcome to you, Minister Simelane, I believe is here, and former Minister Susan Shabangu. Members of the Diplomatic Corps representing various countries in South Africa, our esteemed invited guests and all distinguished members of the audience, Reverend Tawane and all other members of the ecumenical community present, and representatives of various media houses today. I hope you'll carry the story well. This was an outstanding member of our fight against oppression, this one. All friends, former colleagues and relatives of the Nkondo family, watching these proceedings remotely from various places in the continent and globally. Fellow participants, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to you. Please accept my acknowledgement of the line with the necessary protocols. If I've missed anything, please forgive me for now. The Nkondo family in particular, that come to mourn with us, a very dear friend of the struggle, a treasured son of the revolution, an outstanding academic and profound thinker. Professor Nkondo was a renowned intellectual who contributed immensely to the understanding of our world and the world that we live in, not only South Africa, but the world we live in, effortlessly providing insights into a wide range of subjects, a scholar who provided much needed analysis of our place in the world and the broader world we occupied. He had a gift for words, a wordsmith, I would say. In common
in common language, with a rare gift to capture every aspect of our lives and struggles with the easiest phrase that you could throw around. He was able to capture every aspect of our struggles and our lives with a few words that would resonate with us for days, a very rare gift he had with a sharp pen. I got to know the Nkondo family from a friendship I developed in my year-long stint in detention in May 1976 with a younger brother of the illustrious Nkondo family by the name of Zinjiva Nkondo. From a psychological perspective, his friendship carried me through my ordeal, my year-old ordeal in prison. But I only met him for the first time outside of prison. A year later, and soon got to know his family, and I owe him a great deal for the courage he instilled in me to face the ravages of prison. I have therefore embraced the family of the Nkondos because I felt I was carried through the most severe ordeal of my life. I got to know the family from this friendship, and I got to know also the younger members of the family. I owe them all a great deal for the courage that they instilled in me to face the ravages of prison, an illustrious family that played a pivotal role in our understanding of the salient forces in the struggle and our role in harnessing these forces to achieve a revolutionary end. This is how I met this profound intellectual, Professor Nkondo. I soon left the country after being released from prison together with the young Nkondo Zinjiva for some unknown destination in exile. And in Gessler's work, he became a must-read for us in exile. We all read his work and could identify with it. And I, in particular, had become an extended family member. And on return to our country, I found that the Nkondos had become an extended arm of my family, working closely with my mother, who then was the leader of the UDF, who was at that time the third president of the UDF, and they were the intellectual engine that kept her going and kept the organization ideologically ahead of the forces of apartheid. This is the environment we returned to in 1991. Very humble and unobtrusive, the Nkondos were a backroom engine that kept chugging for the organization, the ANC and the UDF. My mother, who was then one of the three presidents of the UDF, had surrounded herself with a solid infrastructure that consisted of the best brains in the Nkondos, and an ardent young revolutionaries that came from that particular family. She surrounded herself with many other ardent revolutionaries, and I dragged Comrade Susan here as a representative of those young ardent revolutionaries. Thank you for coming, Comrade Susan. Recently, at the funeral of the Nkondo family, Professor poignantly gave a moving vote of thanks to all that had gathered there and thanked our family for having looked after his family on return in the same way that they had looked after our mother, summing up a relationship that had carried us through decades of struggle. I don't know what my mother would have done without the Nkondos next to her. I returned home where I had to maneuver my rights to my place. My mother had an extended family with a hierarchy to it, and the Nkondos were pretty much at the very top of it. And we were somewhere down there. So if you came home late and your plate was gone, that was it. She had an extended family, and the Nkondos, as I say, were the apex. Understanding my place in this hierarchy of things, very low, I decided that I would fall in, even though it was against my wishes and a great deal of anguish. In the early years of our return to the country, the Nkondo family held intellectual commanding heights of our discourse with amazing simplicity. My father was soon requested to take up the Vice-Chancellorship of the University of Venda. I was aghast. "Tata, do you know how far the University of Venda is?" And he looked at me, said, "That's not material. I've been given an honor, and I'm going to live up to that honor. And if you know how far Venda is for an old man like my dad, you would know what it meant." "Doesn't matter," he would say, "These Nkondo boys are very good and very sharp, you know," he would respond. He indeed drove to Venda very many times thereafter, and he would steal a satisfied glance in my direction, as much as to say, "I got you." And so we all adjusted to the new situation. My mom, on the other hand, had long accepted the Nkondos with their gentle support throughout her tenure in the UDF. And between them and Sister Bernard and Susan here, there was very little need for any of us in the family. So whether we were there or not, she felt very complete with those people around her. When I became minister, there was an automatic arsenal to help analyze and provide solutions for government. I gathered around me a kind of people that would help me navigate the statecraft. With Professor Nkondo as my advisor, we took on the treacherous task of governance and the need to create a strong public service. The wisdom and guidance that I received from Professor Nkondo made my job so much more manageable and gratifying. Together with other advisors like Professor Siepe today, we were certain that we had all the solutions to our problems. Nothing was beyond our reach. Between him, Professor Siepe, I had an in-house capacity that was unmatched in the country. And together we worked our way with zest because I had the capacity to do so. Most of my achievements in government at that stage would not have been possible without them. And so when I look back at the ground we have traversed with Professor Nkondo, I am filled with gratitude and pride for the sterling work we had and the sterling work that they put up to make sure that I was successful. We took on a jaded public service and sought to breathe new life into it. Professor Nkondo was at his best when he had a solution to sell, and he had a keen sense of putting his eye to it. And he had a way of contorting his face so that you actually understood what he was saying. Even if you didn't understand it, you had to look like you understood it. Some of the time, his intellectual level flew above most of us. But if you fixed your eye on him, he felt, yeah, she's listening. We took on the jaded public service and sought to breathe new life in it, and Professor was at his best. He had a solution to sell, and we tackled the problem with a great deal of zest, with Professor leading the pack, always at his best when he thought he had an answer. Whether you accepted his answer or not, that was your problem. He had an answer, he put it on the table, and your job was to follow that. We restructured the public service with amazing enthusiasm and dexterity. We were certain that we would change the world. We structured the public service, and that became the one regular item of our discussion. And Professor Nkondo was in his element always when he talked about the public service. We sallied forth as troops with an evangelical mission to restructure the public service. We created a university to professionalize the services. And we had hoped that we would outdo Unisa. With all the trappings to incentives, the service here, Professor lived his passion. He had a passion for the public service. He had a passion for people who were responsible for giving services to the people. And when he was in this space, he felt at his best. With all the trappings to incentives and the service, Professor lived out his passion. And I'm glad to say he lived out his passion in my hands. Here, Professor lived out his passion, and I am certain he dreamt of efficiency in the sector. I leave it to you to gauge whether we succeeded or not. We thank the university for their role in hosting this ceremony. There's very little that can be said about Professor Nkondo in the time that we have, but I believe all of you know him. I loved him very much as an older brother, and he taught me a lot. I'm greatly indebted to him, and I'm very grateful for the Nkondos inviting us here. Thank you so much on behalf of my family, on behalf of my mother, and on behalf of myself, for the road that we have trod with Professor to be here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sulu. I wish to recognize in our midst the former Minister of Social Development, Mayor Susan Shabangu. I think she's somewhere. Yes, thank you very much. And also the former Deputy Minister of Public Service and Administration, Pilane Majake. Also, thank you very much. And also the former CEO of APRM, Prof Edima Loka, I think he's sitting somewhere there. Thank you very much. In my other life, I'm told that when you arrive at the funeral, even if you are not prepared for the work, sometimes you are asked to preach there immediately without even prepared yourself. So I assume that even in government, in politics, people are always ready. And I've seen the AG is here, the minister in the presidency. I can give them notes. The one can just come and say, Abusheni, the other one can say, Madegwan, then we are done. In that order, AG, I gave you the notes, please. Minister Nchaveni will tell you that GNU was a cohesion of some sort. So I'm using that context today. Please, I'm asked by the family to do that.
Riperile na mixeweta hinkwenu ni sungula hi ndyangu wa ka Nkondo ni xeweta hinkwavo varhangeri va tiko ra hina ni varhangeri va yunivhesiti ya tiko vafundhisi va mehe na mi khensa ku va mi ri kona ni tlhela ni mi xeweta hi ku titsongahata. I want to thank you, Program Director, for putting me on the spot. In this moment, all I can do is speak not just as Auditor General, because I'm not prepared to do that. I've attended less with my official capacity, but more as the daughter of the late Judge George Maluleke, who was a dear friend and comrade of Prof Muxe Nkondo. So I'm here to mourn with the family and to thank you for giving us a chance to mourn with you, Ma'am, and to remember Papa Gesla. So I stand here in the shoes of my father and my mother, who always spoke very fondly of the late Professor Nkondo. Listening to all of the tributes today, I'm left with tremendous gratitude for this great man who taught so many of us the importance of patriotism, the importance of service, the importance of humility in giving back to the communities that help us by giving us platforms to give expression to our talents in service. And if there's one thing I'll walk away with from this gathering today, it is a deepened commitment to continue to do that which he taught us by example, which is to remember that each of us who happen to have had some privilege of being educated and being afforded a platform to serve, wherever we might do so, we have to remember that ours is to serve society and to deliver on the aspirations of the people that actually depend on us, rather than to be worried about personal gratification. It is this deep sense of service that must inform what we do. The consequences of us choosing otherwise would be dire. I believe that if I follow in that example, on the day that I leave this mortal coil, I'll do so with peace, for I would have made him proud, but more than that, I would have done that which God put me on this earth to do. Imarito alao, hiri, onge moya wokwetsima, ungamchavisela. Onge hinkwenu timbilu ta n'wina ti nga kuma kurhula. Onge Prof Nkondo va nga etlela hi kurhula. Inkomu.
Ishangani isilungu. Minister Nchaveni.
Ishangani isilungu.
You know, I thought at the memorial service of academics, there are no hospital passes, and I feel like this is an ICU pass. And I thought we caught it together with the AG, my sister, and then she just stood on the shoulders of her father, and I'm going, what am I going to say? Even my hymn, because earlier you were singing a hymn, my favorite hymn in Sitsonga, but I realized I don't know the lyrics because I've always read the lyrics on my phone and there's no internet connectivity. So I couldn't get the lyrics. Even the one I wanted to sing is gone. Yeah. I'd like to stand on the protocols that have already been established and greet former Minister Sisulu, former Minister Susan Shabangu, Deputy Minister Thandi Muraka, the VC of my favorite place, University of South Africa, the dearest mother, Ma'am Charlotte. Thank you for being here, Program Director. I would not want to thank you, Program Director, because really I'm even shaking. Because I realize, so when I was walking through, somebody whispered, so you're coming on that capacity, and I said, you know, I can't really take leave of absence from myself. So allow me to speak, and I will not speak on behalf of government because the Deputy President will speak on behalf of government at the funeral service. I'd like to speak on behalf of the presidency. And I recall my own, so I know Prof Nkondo since my baby days. And now I'm grown up, Minister Sisulu, really grown up. She understands what I mean. So I've known Professor Nkondo since I was a baby, and I don't want to quote my mother because she would have been part of the town planning unit of the Thulamela municipality and also the Thando Taxi Association, who were mobilized against the measure of a consolidation of poverty. And she was in that session. But I'd like to talk about and I never went to Univen, so I've experienced Univen as a community around where we are. And when Prof Nkondo named the University of Science and Technology, and imagine you are in Biru and he names it University of Science and Technology, your fear is that the parents are going to say, you want to do science and technology qualification, go next door, it's going to be cheap, and so we're spared. But what was important for me, and this only struck me later, and later during the COVID-19, Prof Nkondo started a process of indigenous knowledge, wanting to establish an indigenous knowledge center at the University of Venda. And he was consolidating with the CSIR all the medicines, the traditional medicines, traditional remedies, anything, the herbs, and doing a catalog of the herbs as part of building that science, because this science was not the westernized science, it was acknowledging the contribution of Africans in the development of science. And all the time, because the South African Health Product Regulatory Authority have never really acknowledged us in Africans and our contribution to science, it never really made sense. When we grew up, and I'm happy the Nkondos understand Chivenda, when we grew up and we had to use chumbe to treat flu or chushengela to treat a sore throat, when we became older and became sophisticated, we dished all that. But lo and behold, COVID-19 hits. all of us were running around, whether you called it Mhlonyane, whether you call it Chiumbeumbe, or whether you call it Shishengera Mpofu, or whether you call it whatever you called it. But it took us back, and myself in particular, and then I was the acting minister for planning, monitoring, and evaluation. I'm the first minister in the presidency. The other ones were planning, monitoring, and evaluation. Context Minister Sisulu. And people tend to confuse. So I'm the first one minister in the presidency. The other ones were planning, monitoring, and evaluation. It only started before the GNU 6th administration. So when I was acting Minister of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation in the presidency, and we were responsible with supporting the Deputy President, then Deputy President David Mabuza, on the vaccine work stream, because there was a work stream dedicated in developing vaccines for Africans and for Africa, and also for our country, because the Western world decided to hold the vaccines and not make them freely available. When they chose to make them available, there would be expiry dates would be near before you could even finish the vaccination period. And then everybody, even including the health authorities, were using Mhlonyane, Chiumbeumbe, and all sorts. I remember in my house, and what do they call that tree? It's here in Pretoria that we, not jacaranda, the speckle bomb, whatever. Yes, there. I realized the wisdom of the work of Prof Nkondo in establishing that database and archive of African herbs and their uses. And if we had taken it serious, we would have developed farm. But so I took a call, and I called him. I said, Prof, why didn't you tell me this thing will come in handy? And he laughed. He says, one day you'll grow up, you'll then have wisdom. I said, but wisdom cannot come with age. He says, wisdom comes with age. So I do not know what we are going to do without him, because he was a very wise man. And his work preceded his time, and his work was visionary. And sitting here, I'm seeing old academics. I'm asking myself if there are younger academics outside of those who are doing AI, who are trying to preserve not only African indigenous knowledge, but African health systems, African developmental system in our country. And I challenge you, Prof Puleng, that the University of South Africa should not only be a platform for us to engage with ideological and academic and theoretical discourse about Africa and its contribution to modernity and development. It should also be a center where we can not only preserve but drive and modernize the contribution of African indigenous knowledge systems, health system, and so forth, so that when we reclaim our position as the home of humanity, as the cradle of humankind, we can also acknowledge ourselves and our contribution that mathematics was not only started in the African continent, but mathematics will be better, and applied mathematics will be useful for our people, because Africa has led that development. And in memory of Prof Nkondo Muxe, we need to do that, because his legacy must live on. And somebody must engage with the University of Venda to talk about that, the Indigenous Knowledge System Center they were establishing, to take it forward and to establish and name it after him. And with that, I'd like to say, may his beautiful revolutionary soul rest in peace. May the family be comforted. Amen.
Thank you very much, Minister Nchavin. I can confirm on behalf of former Minister Sisulu that indeed you've grown up. We are now going to move to sermon and prayer by Rev. Dr. N.J. Tsawani. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. This is verse 4 of the Beatitudes. Rev. Dr. Tsawani, Fidel Castro says this about this text of the Beatitude. I believe Karl Marx could have subscribed to the Sermon on the Mount. As I call over Reverend Sawani.
Thank you. I greet you all in the name of the one who sent me here to preach good news to the poor, spiritually, mentally, and physically. Protocol observed. And I just want to recognize my sister, Puleng. I don't call you professor today, she's my sister. We belong to the same community. And I also want to recognize Reverend Mayagise. He was the one who was supposed to be standing here to bring the last respect to our beloved son. I am reminded, I feel privileged and to be standing here to deliver this sermon. And I'm reminded when I was a student here, I was standing between two intellectual giants. That's Professor Nkondo and Professor Maluleke. They were standing, and Maluleke was promoting me, but Professor Nkondo was advising me. And I remember presenting my dissertation to him. He read it and says, "Oh, wait, Reverend. There is difference between a sermon and an academic. Please go and rewrite this." But I dodged. I went to Professor Maluleke, and Professor Maluleke said the same thing. He said, "For your own integrity and my integrity, please go and rewrite this thing." And I remember, I don't know how I managed to drive from here to back home, Johannesburg. And he said, "We need another year on this." So I stand here as part of paying the last respect to him. Thank you, Reverend Mayagise, for having allowed me to come and deliver this sermon. I will ask one young man to come and read, a young man who respects Professor Nkondo. And Kosinati, he could, if I ask him to speak, he will speak the whole day about the contribution that he made for his development. Please come and read the script. I won't be reading, but I think theologians who are here will punish me for not reading a text. I must speak on the text. So read it, and just read the first two verses and the last two verses, because the story is a bit longish and I just don't want to keep you long here.
Thank you so much. Swaram Fundisi, I see you. All protocol observed. It's not my podium. If I had my chance, like he said, this man, Kokwan Nkondo Zinjiva, really had molded this man that is standing here. I feel privileged to be standing here. Thanks, Rev. Thanks, Rev. Nditlahlaya eka Luke 16, verse 19 to 31. However, I'll read as instructed the first verses, the first two verses, which is and the last one. It reads thus. We know this story. Very important. It is the conversation between Abraham and the rich man. So take that context. The rich man and Lazarus, verses 19 and to 21, that is the first part. It says, there was a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen, lived in luxury every day. At his gate was laid a beggar named Lazarus, covered with sores and longing to eat what fell from the rich man's table. Even the dogs came and licked his sores. The last two verses, that will be 30 and 31, reads as follows. Abraham replied, "They have Moses and the prophets. Let them listen to them." No, Father Abraham. He said, "But if someone from the dead goes to them, they will repent." He said to him, "If they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, they will not be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead." Thank you so much. Thank you.
My theme is after death, what then? After death, what then? I was motivated to pick up this theme from Professor Nkondo himself. He was, when we were robbing him, he raised a question to all of us. He visited Professor Matthew at the hospital, and they then started sharing, and he came up. He said, Professor Matthew said to him, "What was it all about? Life. What was it all about?" In this sermon, I'm trying to answer some of the questions that my professor asked us. When I was doing studies somewhere, I was doing human developmental studies and clinical pastoral education somewhere. Part of the practical work that we need to do was to visit the graveyards and read inscriptions. And we came across 200 years tomb. On that tomb, there was an inscription that goes like this: "Stranger, pause when you pass me by. As you are now, so was once I. As I am now, surely you will be. So prepare yourself to follow me." But this stranger wrote back in an unauthorized inscription. He said, "Stranger, I paused when I passed your grave. As I am now, once you were. As you are now, surely I'll be. I'm ready to face my death, but follow you, I will not. Because I don't know which way you went." The story of the 200 years old inscription introduces us to the issue of life and death. Death is a bridge. Death is a conjunction, connecting us with the life that is to come. About the text, I don't want to keep you here long. In the Gospel of Luke 16, verse 19 to 31, we read about the biblical story that helps us to have a clue. I will emphasize just to have a clue about death and what happens after death. In this story, there are 6 contradictory statements. The first one is contradiction of life between the rich and the poor. There's a soapy that is in Zulu, I'm not familiar with it, but it starts with the song, Amanye madoda ayaphumelela, amanye madoda awaphumeleli, amanye madoda ayaphumelela. It's a soapy. It clearly indicates that in life there are contradictory life. And one of the most important things, the reason why we exist, some of us exist to be siphumelele kundlula amanye amadoda, is that God wants us to address the need of those people. The second contradictory is the certainty of death. It doesn't matter who you are, rich, poor, educated. There is one appointment you are not going to miss, and that appointment is death. The third contradiction is of eternity. This is what we theologians, we Christians are selling. It's a product that we're selling, salvation, that we believe that one day when this life is over, we're still going to have another life. And I want to strongly believe that African people believe strongly, because when we bury our loved one, we bury them with the things and equipment and the tool that they use. So we are even much more informed than the Western theologians who came to bring Christianity to us. We're stronger, we understand salvific act. The fourth contradiction is location. The poor man and the rich man were in a different location. I always, when I preach to my people, I said this life, it's what we call uvevange. It's about chakalaka. It's chakalaka because death and life are interwoven. Light and darkness are interwoven. Hate and love are interwoven. But when you get there, things will be separated. Contract of location. That's why when Lazarus, when the rich man wanted to communicate with Lazarus, Abraham said, no, we are separated. We cannot come to where you are. The fifth contradiction is the condition. When the poor man, Lazarus, died, he was carried up to Abraham's bosom. But when the rich man died, there was a funeral. You understand what I mean? There was a funeral. Special people were invited. Wonderful program. And it was conducted by a well-known parlor. And there were people there. But my Bible says, when the rich man died, he didn't even have time to attend his own funeral. When he rose, when he died, he opened his eyes and he was in torment. In death, we do not lose our personhood, intellects, emotions, will. What we lose is our earthly being, body. What makes a person not to be decaying? It's a body that is only decaying. Because when God created us, we had his image and likeness in us to take care of the whole creation. And his mandate was, you shall love your God with all your heart, your soul and your mind and strength, with all your strength. And the second mandate is to love your neighbor as you love yourself. This we are missing. those of us who are intellectually gifted are missing the mark. Those of us who are wealthy are missing the mark. You all understand me? In our own country, the reason why we have few people and majority of the people who are suffering is because to those much is given, much is expected. The reason why we are where we are today is because we have missed the mark. But Professor Nkondo, alas, he was a different kind of a man. He had a balance of the three-dimensional of a complete life. That's why we robbed him. The Madodana is the lowest realm of the people in our church, and he was part and parcel of that. He stayed there. When he go to church, he stayed the whole day. You will never even believe that this was the busiest man in his life. The moral lesson of this story is that death comes as a common denominator. It does not discriminate rich and poor. I'm not talking about negative about richness, intellectual gift, and all of this. But what is important is for us to understand why God gave us those gifts, so that we reach out to those that are in need. Lazarus, the poor man, died for he was sick, crippled, and dependent. He died and was ushered into Abraham's bosom to have rest. It's not all of us who will rest in peace. Every time you go to the graveyard and you see rest in peace. But it's not all of us who will rest in peace. Because there will be a reversal of circumstances. Those who were happy here on earth, things will change. There's a song that we normally sing in the struggle. It says, "Ungakhali umntwana, zizojika izinto. Ziyajika izinto." If we don't live our life according to God's will. We exist on the planet Earth for a reason and for a season. We were created because there's something God wants us to do and demand our presence on this planet. You were created in the image of and likeness of God, imbued in the inherent ability, talents, gift, inclination to fulfill God's purpose. Out of 6.8 billion, you are the only one tasked to do that task. So let us surrender to God's will, so that when our assignment is left undone, it must be done when we leave this planet Earth. In Luke 13:36, for David, after he had served his own generation and did God's will, he fell asleep and he was buried with his father. I strongly believe that Professor Nkondo has done God's will. I cannot expatiate. Already it has been done so. He came here for a reason, and God brought him here to lift up the people who are oppressed. The Spirit of the Lord was up on him. He preached good news to those who were poor, mentally and spiritually. The Spirit of the Lord was upon him because he came to counsel those who were heavy laden. The Spirit of the Lord was upon him because educationally he lifted eyes and he opened the mind of those who were blinded. For this reason, he came to this world, for that particular reason. In conclusion, as I promised that I will not keep you long, We are all beggars at the gate, seeking entrance into the kingdom of our final dwelling place. Howard Thurman, one of the greatest scholars, who Martin Luther King became a follower. I'm told the people who have done an extensive study on Dr. Martin Luther King said in his briefcase, he always carried a Thurman's book. He wrote something like this. He said, the years, months, days, hours, minutes, and seconds have gone by. Here and there are incidents, towering moment, naked memory, whisper in the dark, a golden glow. These and much, much more are fabric of the time we have lived. Books we have written, poems we have written, business we have started, administration we have run, leadership that we have run, are just nothing but a fleeting imitation of the outside world of ourselves. What men and women sees may tell about the path they have traveled. No one shares the secret of life. No one enters into the heart of the mystery. There are telltale signs that marks the passing of one's appointed days. Here on the planet Earth, we are always on the outside of the story, and we are permitted to witness on the outside. But when we are allowed to get inside, the price exacted to us is to close our lips. We cannot relate. When we are dead, we can no longer witness, only close our lips. So, our final dwelling place is where we are all going, but where we are finally, when I finally admitted, our price exacted to us is to seal our lips. And this is the strangest of all the paradox of human adventure. We live inside all the experiences that we have accounted. We are only permitted to bear witness only on the outside. Such is the riddle of life and the story of our passing days. This is what Thurman says. To the Nkondo family, as I conclude, God is love. That's where we begin and end. God is love, the presence who enter our lives. Every instance we pass from the darkness of the womb to the light of the world. Birth and death is a forward movement. God's love and presence that accompanies us during our lifetime is God's presence in all our situations. No matter what situation you find yourself, love and light will always be there, because God is light and life. In life and in death, in all situations, in all circumstances, we shall stay in the light of God. According to one of the human developmentalists, Kubler-Ross, she says, when we lose our loved one due to death, it is perfectly normal to grief. We must honor and recognize each stages of grief, every emotional we have. There will be shock, denial, anger, confusion, fear, helplessness, numbness, and eventually we will accept. And I'm asking you, Nkondo family, go through those 5 stages of mourning, and that in itself, it's a healing on its own. In this regard, death has become a bridge, a transformation. Our loved ones now exist in a new time, new form, new reality, and they've been transformed from physical to spiritual. Let me speak in Shangani in concluding. In Corinthians 2, Paul speaks about death. He says, "O death, where is thy sting?" I didn't understand it. When I tried to contextualize it to my African understanding of theology and religion, I was reminded that when I was a young man, I was a shepherd with my brother. And in the bush, my brother will go and hunt and harvest honey. And the bees will sting him. And every now and then when he called me to come and join him to eat, I refused. And I was afraid of the sting of the bee. But he says to me, "Joe, don't worry. The bees have stung me. They have no sting anymore. So come and enjoy the fruit of my labor." We Christians believe that on the cross, Christ died for us. The venom and the sting of bees have dealt with Christ on the cross. Eka mwina baka Nkondo. Papa a hlawurile loko a hanya la misaveni ku ti hlawulela ku ya tshama under the cross. Rifo leri nga n'wi fikela a ra ha na matimba ka yena. It may make all these noises that we all of us are afraid of. But Papa, it's in a good place now. Like Lazarus, he has rested. Be comforted knowing that death has been conquered. For God, through Christ, conquered death now and forevermore. Be comforted.
Thank you very much for the comforting words to the family of Prof Nkondo. You know, one of the mistakes that we usually do is to use what we call a Kaiser Chiefs philosophy. Buy one, get one free. And in that philosophy, we sometimes exclude acknowledging other people. And in this regard, we also have erred by failing to recognize the contribution of Prof Olga as an intellectual herself, married by an intellectual, contributing in student affairs and services and social sciences. And that's the contribution that Mayor Olga has done in her own right as a woman in Africa, where everything is against women, especially black women. So I thought maybe I should do that acknowledgement, an escape clause, as I'm about to close this session. Prof Makanya, I must also acknowledge you as the former principal and vice-chancellor. I always used to think that they are the same until I realized that principal and vice-chancellor do not necessarily mean the same and carry the same responsibility. Thank you very much for, I know when we called you a verifier, you had to come back so that you are able to attend the memorial of Prof Nkondo. I'm going to ask that after Prof Seputa, the Registrar of Unisa, has done vote of thanks and closure, to request members of Nkondo family, the council members present, ministers, deputy ministers, AG, MENCOM, to go to the third floor so that themselves and the family continue with engagements, because they need to do some other preparation, while I request the rest of the members who are here, friends and colleagues, to, at the exit, there are refreshments that are prepared for all of you. In those few words, the Despota, Prof Spota, the podium is yours.
Program Director, Professor Snokwani, Professor Olga Nkondo and the family, associated Nkondo families. Please allow me to stand on existing protocols because Program Director, I won't be able to come back and say I'm sorry. Hamilosa. Surprising as it may sound, this is indeed a good afternoon. It's an afternoon in which we honor and celebrate the life of an incredible example of a leader whose giant intellectual footsteps have reverberated across the globe. We bid farewell to an exceptional leader whose legacy will surely live beyond today and for many more generations to come. It was Angela Mayo who wrote, "When great trees fall, rocks on distant hills shudder, lions hunger down, in tall grasses and even elephants lumber after safety." And so it is indeed this afternoon. While we celebrate the great soul, it is with heavy hearts that we take the salute. We were comforted that the late Professor Nkondo was covered, protected, and remembered, and through the Holy One, by the Holy One. And so our spirits were lifted up by the soothing teaching and prayers of Reverend Dr. Chawani. Hakensa, Reverend. We learned today that death is indeed a bridge. And you reminded us that we will never miss our appointments. It's not me, that was Reverend. Let me thank our Principal and Vice-Chancellor, Professor LenkaBula, for welcoming everyone to this occasion. Indeed, Professor LenkaBula, you said this thing so well, befitting of a memory of the undisputed heavyweight champion in servant leadership that Professor Nkondo was and will continue to be. For availing himself to honor this luminary doyen, even in the face of his oblivious hectic schedule, we are most grateful to the Honorable Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Minister Ronald Lamola, for delivering a heartfelt tribute. I was thinking he was going to deliver a tribute in respect of a luminary, but I believe now he delivered that tribute in respect of his parent and in respect of his mentor, that is Professor Nkondo, from his early days at Univen, as he indicated. We thank you in absentia, Minister Lamola, and we hope you'll travel well wherever you are going. We are also appreciative of the tribute delivered by the advisory panel member of the broad pool of ideas and former Statistician General of South Africa, Professor Padi Lehotla. From your presentation this afternoon, I now understand we always in our corners ask ourselves, what is it so special about Vhembe district? Minister Nchabeni talked about Mbilwi, and there are other schools. I think the other one will be Tengwe. We often ask ourselves, what is it so special about Vhembe district that there are so many scientists and statisticians coming from that area? I understand today why. That was most probably because of the foundation laid by Professor Nkondo. Thank you, Professor Lehotla, for sharing that with us. On behalf of the University Council, we received the eulogy from Mayor Charlotte Mampani. Through that, we got to understand the deep loss that the university is experiencing. It is quite clear that there is so much value in accumulated wisdom, and that resides in one who has been through the highs and lows of executive management experience and the intricate matters of higher education in general. The passing of Prof Nkondo has weaned us of a fountain that was forever bubbling and with freshness. Thank you, Mampani. We appreciate that. To the family representatives, Tatana Wishani Nkondo, as well as former Minister of Tourism, Lindiwe Sisulu, you have been the face of the family this afternoon, and we learned so much things that we did not know about Professor Nkondo. Thank you for what you shared with us this afternoon. Your show of strength and comfort in these difficult early days of the demise of your loved one and our leader is something that we should learn from. Indeed, the departed would always want us to be able to stand up and hold our heads high and to be brave even as we mourn, but continue to lead focused and purposeful lives that would bring a smile to his face wherever he is. Indeed, we are very pleased that the family allowed us to enjoy the brightness and the light that Professor Nkondo shone upon our lives and learnings. Thank you, Professor Nkondo, for allowing us to share the life of such a rare gift. We appreciate that, and we don't take that for granted. That light has illuminated many paths to deeper insights. We heard from Minister Lamola, we heard from former Minister Lindiwe Sisulu, we heard from our former Statistician General, we also heard from all other speakers, including the Auditor General and Minister Nchabeni, who were hijacked to come and say something. But I think, Professor Snokwane, that was for a good cause. And it proves the point said by Minister Nchabeni that wisdom comes with age. Thank you for that, that is Professor Snokwane. Let me also thank the Auditor General, Memaluleke, and Minister Nchabeni for having agreed when you were hijacked to come and say something, but indeed you were prepared. It sounded as if you prepared many days before so that you can come and share with us what Professor Nkondo did, not only for you, but for the entire community and the university. Thank you for that. We appreciate that. Allow me to thank all of you, ladies and gentlemen, for congregating here this afternoon and for showing your respect and love for this colossal son of the soil. Thank you very much for the support you are giving the family, especially at this point in time. Thank you very much for the support you are giving the nation, the university, and the globe, and we appreciate that. As we close this memorial service, I wish you safety in your return travels and comfort in the knowledge and awareness that indeed Professor Nkondo deserves true and will indeed rest in eternal peace. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Sepota. I'm going to request the last hymn or chorus as we allow the family, the ministers, former ministers, e.g., Prof. Makanya and MENCOM, to vacate the hall. Ke kopa sefela chorus.